Well, thank you, Miles. I'm not sure what the Beatles song was all about, but thanks for inviting me here. Thank you also to you, Miles, for the hard work you've done at the helm of the Institute of Directors over the past 7 years. You have done a great job. You've been a powerful voice for business, and we all wish you incredibly well for the future. My message to you today is pretty straightforward. This coalition government is unequivocally pro-business, and our approach is based on the simple truth that if you succeed, we will succeed, and the country will succeed. And by promoting enterprise, rewarding aspiration, we will enable you, the wealth creators of Britain, to generate the jobs and the growth that our country needs. And the truth is, we have to be realistic about where we're coming from and optimistic about where we're going. Now, first, the realism. We are recovering from the biggest banking crisis our country has ever seen in its entire history. We're coming out of the deepest recession in living memory. And we are dealing with the largest budget deficit in Britain's peacetime history. Now, that was the economic inheritance bequeathed to us by our predecessors. And that is why, and I warned this last year, the recovery will be choppy. High commodity prices, the earthquakes in Japan, the uncertainty in the Eurozone, they are all weighing down on growth across the world. Yet while we must be realistic about the challenges, I do think we can be optimistic about the future. For despite these headwinds, progress has been made in the 12 months since the new government came to office. 400,000 private sector jobs have been created over that period. 89,000 people have come off the unemployment rolls. Manufacturing is up almost 5%. Business investment is up 11%. Export volumes are up 16%. I'm glad that the Bank of England is today forecasting a steady recovery. As the bank governor said this morning, they expect that the recent softness in activity will prove temporary. And this is all part of an essential rebalancing of our economy, from imports to exports, from debt to investment, from public to private. And it lays the foundation of a competitive, business-led growth that we need to see. Now, this would simply not be possible without the crucial steps we've taken to instill confidence in Britain's ability to pay its way in the world. Let's not forget where we were exactly 1 year ago to the day, May the 11th, 2010. The general election had resulted in a hung parliament. The danger was weak and unstable government, unable to take tough decisions in the national interest. This in a country with the highest budget deficit of any in the G20 and whose credit rating was on a negative outlook. This at a time when the sovereign debt crisis was raging in Europe. It was a moment of real economic danger. But together we overcame it. We formed a strong coalition government. We put a firm commitment to tackle the nation's debts at its heart. Within 50 days, we had put in place a credible deficit reduction policy. A year on, much of it has been legislated for, and its first measures have taken effect. Our credit rating has come off negative outlook when other countries are facing downgrades. And I believe we have brought much-needed stability at home and attracted near universal confidence abroad. And to anyone still wondering whether we needed to take these difficult decisions, I say just look at what has happened to other countries over the past year. First Greece, then Ireland, then Portugal, now Greece again. 3 countries which failed to convince the world that they could pay their way. Now they are all being bailed out at huge cost. In the United States, now itself with a credit rating on negative watch, President Obama has unveiled a deficit reduction proposal that actually goes faster than ours. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Miles, to thank the Institute of Directors for your steadfast support on this issue. It has proved vital Miles, you were right to say this morning that you remain absolutely supportive of the speed and the extent of the public spending cuts, and while not enough recognition has been made of the upside of reducing public debt. The real, practical impact of what we have achieved together is there to be seen in the interest rates that the businesses and the families of Britain face today. The market interest rates in Britain are today at 3.4%. In Italy, they are 4.6%, 5.3% in Spain, 9.7% in Portugal, 10.6% in Ireland, and over 15% in Greece. And over the past year, the gap between Britain's market interest rates and those in Germany has narrowed to just about 0.25 percentage point, while for France, for Italy, and Spain, the gap with Germany has widened. In other words, we have the interest rates of Germany despite having a bigger budget deficit than Greece or Portugal. That is our achievement. And let me make this clear on the first anniversary of this coalition. We in this government, Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, are as united today in our mission to reduce Britain's deficit as we have ever been. We are unwavering in our commitment to economic stability and recovery, last year, this year, and for the 4 years to come. Every business in this country depends on a strong government and a strong and credible economic policy, and this coalition government will deliver just that for the next 4 years. But we know, and I know, that stability on its own is not enough. And you and others rightly make the point that alongside a plan for the deficit, we also needed a plan for growth. And in this year's budget, I believe we answered those calls. Let's face it, over the past decade, Britain's economy lost ground compared to our competitors. Our tax system became uncompetitive. Our businesses were constrained by red tape. And we fell behind the rest of the world in the skills of our workforce. We simply could not go on like that. So we have set 4 economic ambitions for Britain. First, we want Britain to have the most competitive tax system in the G20, bar none. And I know on this, Miles has been a tireless advocate. It's an ambition set for a good reason. A decade ago, we had the 3rd lowest corporate tax rate in Europe. By last year, we had the 7th highest. Now that had to change. And last month, the main rate of corporation tax came down from 28% to 26%. It will keep coming down in each of the next 3 years to reach 23% in 2014, the lowest rate ever in our history and the lowest in the G7. And instead of going ahead with the last government's planned increase in the small companies rate to 22%, we've cut it to 20%. That's not all. We've also made the taxation of international profits far more competitive. Britain has become a place for international businesses to move to instead of to leave. We're introducing a patent box. That's an ultra-competitive 10% rate that will attract knowledge industries from around the world. We have started the enormous task of simplifying the tax system. We abolished over 40 complex tax reliefs in this year's budget. And we've also begun the work of merging the systems of income tax and national insurance, a huge reduction in payroll red tape for businesses, and we need your help to make it happen. And as I said at the budget, high personal taxes can be as damaging to growth as high corporate taxes, so I am clear that the 50% tax rate would do lasting damage to our economy if it were to become permanent, as some in politics now suggest. It should be a temporary measure. Our second economic ambition is that Britain should be the best place in Europe to start, finance and grow a business. Now again, over the last decade, the UK fell behind. In the Global Competitiveness Index, it went from 4th place to 12th place. So how are we going to regain this lost ground? Well, on regulation, in this budget, we stopped £350 million of costly business regulations. Vince Cable and I have now imposed a moratorium on new domestic regulations on small businesses. On planning, one of the great obstacles to growth that no government has had the courage to tackle, we are now shifting the balance from delay and objection towards development and expansion. On research and development, we have just increased the support available to small businesses through the R&D tax credits from 175% to 200%. Next year, it will go up again to 225%. On finance for startups, I've made it easier to attract enterprise investment capital, including an increase in income tax relief from 20% to 30%, which has already come into effect. And we've also delivered on the promise that I made to you at this conference last year to scrap the most damaging part of the planned increase in employers' national insurance. Since last month, it is cheaper for businesses to employ anyone earning under £21,000 a year. And when the day comes when some of you want to sell your business, we have doubled and then doubled again in the space of the year the level of entrepreneurs' relief. So cuts in business taxes, increases in entrepreneurs' relief, more tax breaks for investment. None of these things are easy to do when you have a high budget deficit. They would not be the priorities of many other governments that you could imagine governing this country. But they are this government's priority, and we want you now to make the most of them. Our third ambition is for Britain to become a more balanced economy by encouraging exports and investment. Now consider this shocking statistic. During the boom years, during the last decade, before the bust, private sector employment actually fell in a region as important as the West Midlands. Private sector fell in a region as important as the West Midlands. I think that is a shocking indictment of the last decade. And we want private sector jobs and growth that are spread across the country. And that's why we are now establishing 21 enterprise zones to give a boost to areas with real potential. I hope, Miles, your members can get involved in them. That's why we've continued, despite the pressures, to invest in science and our transport networks. Over the next 4 years, we're going to invest £30 billion in transport projects. That is more than during the past 4 years. And next week, we will launch the new £2.5 billion Business Growth Fund, paid for by the banks as part of the Merlin deal, which will provide equity finance for growing businesses. But a more balanced economy also means more exports and investment across every sector of the economy. And that's why we've got Stephen Green, one of Britain's global business leaders, to become our trade minister. This week he set out his plans to boost exports to new markets, to increase small business exports, and it's supported, and the announcement was made today, by a newly focused Foreign Office whose presence will be felt even more in countries like China and India. Our fourth and final ambition is to have a more educated and a better skilled workforce. And this is something I know that the Institute has campaigned on this year and many years past. Between the years 2000 and 2009, Britain fell from 4th to 16th place in the World League tables for science, 8th to 28th place in mathematics. In this global economy, when we must compete on skills and innovation, this is a recipe for long-term decline. So this government has embarked on radical reforms to education. More academies have been created in the last 12 months than in the last 13 years. We've taken the difficult but absolutely essential decision to reform student finance to ensure that our universities continue to be well funded. Many would have ducked that challenge, but we did not. And we're addressing the long-standing issue of poor vocational training with 100,000 new work experience places for young people, 250,000 more apprenticeships, and at least 24 new university technical colleges. So more competitive taxes, more support for business, more balanced growth, a better educated workforce. That is our plan for growth. There is one more thing that I will say. Delivering this will not be easy. The forces of stagnation will try and stand in the way of the forces of enterprise. Believe you me, for every line item of public spending, there will be a union defending it. For every regulation on business, a pressure group to defend it. Your voice, the voice of business, needs to be heard and go on being heard in that battle. Let me give you just one example of an issue which businesses have raised with me many times over the years, and that's the costly impact of employment laws and regulations. Now, for many years, no minister was willing to tackle this issue and make the argument, yes, employees have rights and they should be respected, but what about the right to get a job? What about the right to start a business and not to be sued out of existence or drowned in paperwork? Well, this coalition government has had the courage to answer those questions. Not only did Vince Cable announce earlier this year that there will be fees and reforms to deter vexatious claims at employment tribunals, but I can tell you today that the government will publish a detailed timetable for the wholesale review of employment law in this country. It includes plans to review the unlimited penalties that currently apply in discrimination employment tribunals, simplify the administration of the national minimum wage, review the TUPE regulations, and reform the consultation period for collective redundancies. Now, some of these may be controversial. Unions and interest groups may oppose them. So I say to the business community, to all of you in this room, don't be passive observers. Don't stay on the sidelines. Get stuck into the argument and support us in making the case for growth. An enterprising Britain cannot be built by government alone. An enterprising Britain can only be built on the endeavour, the aspiration and the ambition of people in this room. So let's get on and build that enterprising Britain together. Thank you very much.